A biased police officer tailed a black man through a supermarket. He watched him constantly, asked him pointless questions, and even attempted to stop him from leaving. But a few minutes later, that same officer's face went white when he discovered the truth. The person he was harassing was in fact an undercover FBI agent looking into his own police force. Yes, you heard that correctly. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you are watching from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. Now, let's discuss David. David entered the store with his hands in his pockets. It was a scorching afternoon and all he needed was some water and a frozen pizza. That was it. He kept his head down. He was not there to speak to anyone. He was not there to create any issues. But the instant he passed the entrance, a uniformed officer near the door squinted his eyes. The officer's name was Miller, and the moment he saw David, he began observing him intently. David said nothing. He took a cart, went down the first aisle, and began comparing prices. But every few seconds, he could sense it. That look, that intense look from behind. Miller moved sluggishly, acting as if he was checking the security cameras. But he was not looking at the cameras. He was trailing David. David took a bottle of water, then some bread. He looked over his shoulder. Still there. Now, hold on for a moment, everyone. If you have ever been watched in a store for no reason, you already know how that feels. That feeling of tightness in your chest, that deep breath. It is not fair. And David was feeling all of it. Back to the narrative. David went down the frozen food aisle. Miller followed. Then audibly Miller asked, "Can I assist you with anything?" David did not react. He just looked at him calmly and answered, "No, I'm fine." Miller came nearer. "Are you sure? You have been wandering around for some time." "I am buying groceries," David stated simply. "That is what this store is for, isn't it?" Miller did not appreciate the tone. He expected David to be afraid. He expected David to be anxious. He leaned closer. "What is your name?" David stared at him. "Is that a question you ask every shopper?" Miller scowled. He spoke into his radio. "Suspicious person in aisle 7, requesting backup." Everyone, can you believe this? Just think about trying to buy food and being treated as a criminal for no reason. But let's continue. David showed no reaction. He just kept walking, took his pizza, and went to the checkout. Miller followed, his hand on his holster. People began to stare. One woman seemed puzzled. Another man shook his head disapprovingly. At the register, the cashier scanned David's items. The total came up. David took out a card and tapped it. "Sir, I am going to need you to come outside," Miller stated. David picked up his bag, held it in one hand, and asked, "For what reason?" Miller moved closer. "You're behaving suspiciously. I need to ask you some questions outside." David remained still, composed. Then he took out a small black wallet from his back pocket. He opened it. Inside was a badge, FBI. Miller blinked. David said, "Special Agent David Cole, I am here on a mission. You have just made a very big mistake." Silence. The cashier was shocked. Miller took a small step back. "What mission?" David looked him directly in the eyes. "Internal police corruption. You have just become a subject of my report." Miller's face turned pale. David held up a phone. It had been recording the entire time. Audio, video, everything. "So, why do you think I allowed you to follow me so far?" David inquired. "You just demonstrated the exact conduct I am investigating." Someone in the line whispered, He's with the FBI. Now, look, I have to pause here again and ask you, what would you do if you witnessed this happening in real life? Would you say something? Would you start recording? Or would you act as if nothing was wrong? Because this is the kind of story that reveals what subtle prejudice looks like. It is at a glance. It is in the actions. It sometimes hides behind a badge. Back to David. He did not raise his voice. He did not make any threats. He just walked past Miller, still recording, and went to the store's exit. Outside, another police car was arriving. David did not hesitate. He walked directly to the backup officers and stated, "Inform your department that Agent Cole will be submitting a federal report." He showed them his badge. The officers were stunned. One of them asked what took place. David just gestured back towards the store. "Inquire with your colleague inside." And with that, he entered his car and drove away. But the story is not finished yet, because what David discovered next would alter everything. David did not go directly home. He drove 10 minutes to a small office building 2 blocks from the police station. Inside, he took the elevator to the 4th floor. This was not just any office. This was the temporary FBI field headquarters for the investigation he had been conducting for 5 weeks. As he entered, Agent Sarah, his partner on the case, looked up from her laptop. "Are you all right?" she asked. David nodded. "I got him. Full video, clear audio. He trailed me through the whole store, tried to stop me at the checkout." Sarah lifted her eyebrows. "He made contact." David nodded again. "Attempted to get me outside. I identified myself before he could proceed further." Then he turned pale. She leaned back. "This might be the breakthrough. We have been collecting reports about that precinct for months. Racial profiling, intimidation, fabricated charges. But now we have one caught on camera in real time with an FBI badge right in his face." David sat down and connected the recording device. He did not smile. He did not feel triumphant, because this was not just about him. Let's pause for a moment. Viewers, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been treated unfairly due to your appearance, because of the color of your skin? If you have, just type yes in the comments. You are not by yourself. What happened to David is still happening to real people every single day. Back to the story. David and Sarah spent the next 2 hours examining the footage. Every second was important. Every action Miller made inside that store created a picture, a very clear one. At 6 p.m., David called his supervisor. By 7:15, the report was sent to Internal Affairs with the evidence included. By 9 a.m., Officer Miller was suspended pending investigation. But here is the twist. David did not just end it there. 2 days later, he met privately with a group of local community leaders, church pastors, teachers, and small business owners. They sat in a circle. David stood before them. He stated, "I did not come here just to catch one corrupt officer. I came to comprehend what your community endures every day. I want to hear your stories. I want the truth." An older woman spoke up. "They stop our young men on their bikes, search them without any reason." A young man added, "Last year they put my cousin in handcuffs outside our own home. They said he matched the description. He was just getting the mail." David listened to everything. He wrote it all down, because this story was not just about his experience in the store. It was about a recurring issue, and he was putting the pieces together. Let me pause again. Everyone, if you are still with me, Type justice is important in the comments because too many people endure their suffering quietly. But when stories like David's are shared, it shines a light on the dark areas. Now, let's move forward 1 week. David was summoned to testify in a private hearing. The room was chilly. Police officials sat opposite him. Miller was also there, in a suit, but sweating through it. David showed the video. No one spoke for 5 entire minutes. When the video was over, David looked up and said only one thing. "You do not have the right to treat people like criminals just because of their appearance." The room remained silent. Then the main investigator spoke. "Thank you, Agent Cole. We have what we need." 3 days later, Miller was dismissed. The department was compelled to issue a public apology to the community. But again, David did not feel victorious because for him, this was not a victory. It was a beginning. In his final week of the assignment, David met with young students at a nearby high school. He spoke to a group of teenagers, mostly of color, about what had occurred. One student raised his hand and asked, "What should we do if an officer treats us that way?" David paused, then responded, "Remain calm. Be aware of your rights. Record if possible. Speak up when it is safe. And always remember, you are important whether they acknowledge it or not." Let that really sink in, everyone. David could have responded with anger. He could have yelled in the store, but he chose patience and the truth. And that changed everything. The officer who viewed him as a danger ended up being exposed, not just for a poor choice, but for a system that permits it. And perhaps, just perhaps, one story like this can compel that system to reform. So now I ask you, the person watching this video, what would you have done if you were in David's position? Would you have stayed calm like he did, or would you have spoken up more forcefully? Let me know in the comments. Be safe. Be strong.